Pause and notice the timing. Of all the noise you could be scrolling through, this found you before October 1st. That is not trivial. Some moments are not hallways but doorways, brief thresholds that respond to the quality of your attention. You are standing at one now. The simple act of staying with these words is already shifting the station your awareness is tuned to. Like turning from static to a clear signal your body recognizes before your mind catches up. Here's the truth. Plain and usable, you are not just watching. You are co-creating. Thoughts carry an electric edge, emotions a magnetic pull, and together they instruct your environment with surprising fidelity. We were trained to wait for proof before allowing belief, to demand signs before we stand in certainty. But life answers the tone you embody, not the mask you present. And during this narrow window before October 1st, it takes less effort for a new tone to take and become your baseline. Think of a phase change. Water is just water until a precise point, then it boils. Human consciousness has its own points of transformation, and collective cycles create short spans when the heat is right. You have felt the breadcrumbs, repeating numbers, perfectly timed conversations, dreams that feel more real than waking. None of it was random. A deeper intelligence has been piloting you here, to stop admiring the door and finally walk through. Let's name the pain gently. Years of scattered attention left you overstimulated yet undernourished. You gathered information while losing coherence, chased novelty while leaking power, mistook endless consumption for growth, and still some part of you never fully slept. It kept searching for language that matched what you sensed. Reality is responsive. You are not a passenger. Timing is a law, not luck. That part of you is reading now, ready to stop bargaining with limitation and start issuing clean instructions to your life. Carry this line with you. Live from the reality you choose, not toward it. This is not pretending. It is practice. The field does not respond to wishful phrases. It responds to embodied certainty. The way your shoulders set when you decide. The way your breath lengthens when you trust. The way your words simplify into truth. When you move and speak as the person your soul has pointed to, the world reorganizes around that signature. You are not asking. You are remembering. Resistance will speak, calmly, persuasively, telling you that you are late, unqualified, too complicated. Hear it, measure it, and take the next honest step anyway. The countdown is not a threat. It is a frame. Before October 1st, stabilizing new patterns demands less strain. After the gate resets, transformation remains possible, but it will ask more consistency, more stamina, more deliberate coherence. If you can move now, move now. If this truly lands, write 99 below. Not as superstition, but as a seal. 9 is the number of completion, the closing of a cycle. Doubled, 99 marks completion multiplied. The moment you stop rehearsing who you were and begin living who you are. Let it be a small public promise to the future you. And if you want to stay aligned as we cross this threshold, subscribe now. We will build layer upon layer, each lesson resting on the one you stabilized today. Ahead, we make the invisible practical. Why October 1st marks a genuine phase gate, how intention without coherence fails, and how to hold your signal when old patterns test your resolve. There are dates that behave less like numbers on a calendar and more like thresholds in physics. Moments when a system, warmed quietly over time, reaches a precise point and changes state. Ice softens, water sings, vapor rises. Human consciousness follows similar choreography. For months you have felt the slow increase in heat, repeating numbers, perfectly timed conversations, dreams that land with the weight of messages. This has not been random reassurance. It has been calibration. October 1st is not a superstition. It marks the close of a cycle in which conditions have been unusually favorable for stabilization. During this span, the effort required to imprint a new internal tone has been lower than usual. The field noise has been quieter. Your nervous system has been more willing to accept new instructions. A gate, in other words, has been open. Why speak of gates at all? Because attention is not just looking, it is ordering. When many people hold compatible states for a sustained period, those states become easier for others to access. The way a path appears through grass when enough feet have passed. For 9 months and 11 days, the collective has been forming such a path. Call it an upgrade corridor. Inside it, clarity comes faster, coherence holds longer, and the habits that once dragged you back lose some of their pull. When the date turns to October 1st, the corridor doesn't vanish. It crystallizes. The baseline rises. Support shifts from acceleration to maintenance, and late entries must invest more steadiness to achieve what earlier required less. Not impossible, just more demanding of presence, choice, and rhythm. If this sounds abstract, bring it to the body. Think of moments when a change was effortless, not because you tried harder, but because the timing carried you. You did not force yourself to breathe deeper. Your breath simply obeyed the room. This window has been such a room. You found yourself reading different pages, choosing different words, noticing how your shoulders set when you decide. You are not becoming someone else. You are allowing who you are to have jurisdiction. The point of naming a gate is not to cause panic, but to focus kindness, to help you place your best attention while it matters most, to let momentum do some of the lifting before the currents change. What shifts after the gate? Noise rises a little. Habits ask for proof again. The world tests if your decision was a mood or a measure. In practical terms, you will be asked to supply more continuity, to return to your tone when the day runs rough, to choose simple practices that recenter you without drama, to keep language clean when explanation would leak your power. The grace of the corridor becomes the work of a craft. Crafts are beautiful because they last. If the window was the kiln, October 1st begins the curing. What you formed takes on strength through steady, ordinary heat. How then do you use the hours that remain? Not with rush, but with precision. Choose one sentence that names your baseline: calm, clarity, truth, sufficiency, and let your day agree with it in small ways. Breath that lengthens, posture that organizes, words that fit on stone. Look at the places where you still bargain with what you already know, and close the bargain gently. Archive a habit that scatters you. Say no once cleanly where you used to explain. Say yes once bravely where you used to delay. None of this is spectacle. It is authorship. The window favors authors who write in their own hand. Remember, a gate is not a finish line. It is a change in terrain. On the other side, the path continues. Wider for some, steeper for others, but always walkable for those who keep step with their own integrity. You are not racing a clock. You are learning a rhythm. When October 1st arrives, let it find you already moving as the person your future keeps pointing to, measured, lucid, and kind. The rest of this journey will show you how attention collapses possibility into form, why the field obeys what you embody, not what you merely repeat, and how to hold your signal when old patterns knock on familiar doors and find no answer. Reality is not a blank wall that you throw wishes at. It is a responsive field that reads the signals you steadily emit. The simplest way to understand this is to separate appearance from instruction. Appearance is whatever your circumstances currently look like. Instruction is the signal your system sends, through thought patterns, emotional tone, and the posture of your attention, about what to stabilize next. Most people stare at appearance and accidentally reinforce it. You instead are learning to issue instruction. Start with attention. Attention is not merely noticing. It is selection. The moment you hold a thing in steady awareness, your nervous system begins to allocate energy to it, and your environment starts reflecting that allocation. This is why scattered focus produces scattered outcomes. You are asking the field to build 5 rooms at once with one set of hands. When attention concentrates, probability narrows. Think of standing in fog with a flashlight. Wherever the beam rests becomes navigable first. Your beam is your instruction. Thoughts and emotions are the electrical and magnetic halves of one signal. A thought sets direction like a vector. An emotion supplies charge like current. A clear thought without emotional congruence is a blueprint no one funds. Intense emotion without a coherent thought is electricity with no circuit. Noise, sparks, burnout. When direction and charge match, the field can translate your inner state into outer sequence. Encounters, ideas, openings that feel improbably timed, but are simply responsive to a stable signature. This is why affirmations so often disappoint. If the sentence you repeat conflicts with the tone you embody, the field mirrors the tone, not the sentence. Saying "I am abundant," while your body rehearses vigilance, instructs the field to produce more situations that justify vigilance. Saying "I am loved," while your language bargains for scraps, instructs the field to send scraps. The correction is not to shout louder. It is to become quieter and truer, to let your breath, posture, and choices align with the statement until the statement is merely a description of what you're already living. Make it practical. Choose one domain: work, health, relational life. Name in one clean line the state you are stabilizing there. Then ask 3 questions throughout the day. Does my breath match this state or contradict it? Do my words match this state or bargain against it? Do my micro-choices, where I put my time, what I consume, how I exit a room, match this state or leak it? These checks are not punishment. They are calibration. Calibration is gentler than effort. It is the art of returning the instrument to tune each time it drifts. Your body will tell you when alignment is real. When instruction and embodiment agree, breathing becomes less effortful without you forcing it. The jaw unclenches without a reminder, and attention stops compulsively scanning for reasons to doubt. You will still encounter friction, but it feels like weather passing over a steady landscape rather than a storm uprooting your house. This internal ease is not laziness. It is proof that the signal is coherent enough for the field to work with you instead of around you. What about old patterns that seem to have momentum of their own? Think of them as grooves worn into a record by years of replay. New music does not erase the groove. It overwrites it by spinning more often. The moment you lapse into the old song, do not dramatize it. Notice, breathe, resume the new track. Frequency is built by repetition, not by one heroic performance. The field takes its cues from what you consistently demonstrate, not from what you occasionally declare in a burst of enthusiasm. Guard your inputs. The signals you ingest become the signals you emit. Media that stokes outrage trains your nervous system to expect threat. Doom scrolling is an instruction disguised as pastime. Curate what your senses consume the way a musician protects their hearing. If you must engage with noisy environments, enter with your baseline pre-selected and your attention anchored on breath, posture, or a simple sentence that you feel rather than perform. The goal is not avoidance. It is authorship. You will also notice a social effect. As your signal stabilizes, people and opportunities sort themselves. Those tuned to similar patterns will seem to appear out of nowhere. Those attached to your previous frequency may push for the old script. Treat both as information, not judgment. The field is reorganizing your cast to match the scene you are directing now. Your job is to keep directing. Fewer explanations, cleaner choices, ordinary consistency. Finally, understand that the field's timing is precise but not theatrical. Often, the first response to a coherent signal is subtraction. Noise leaves, distractions fade, certain invitations stop arriving. This can feel like loss if you measure only by addition. Read it correctly. Subtraction is clearance, the site being prepared for construction. Hold the tone through the quiet. What is next needs room to land. In short, attention collapses fog into path. Thoughts and emotions must agree to become instruction. Embodiment outranks recital. Repetition builds frequency. Curation protects signal. And subtraction is not absence but readiness. With these mechanics understood, the next step is to move from theory into integration. Living as if the upgrade has already taken root, so the field can recognize you without hesitation. When your attention lingers instead of skimming, your system stops borrowing the mood of the room and begins to transmit its own. That transmission is your signature, the breath that lengthens without force, the heart rhythm that evens out, the eyes that settle, the jaw that unhooks, the spine that remembers height, the language that trims excess until only the necessary remains. Most people mirror whatever they enter. Their signal is a costume. Readiness begins the moment you stop mirroring, and the room quietly starts taking its cues from you. It is not hype or a motivational spike that dissolves at the first inconvenience. It is coherence that survives ordinary pressure. The fluorescent hallway at 4:17 p.m., the curt email, the familiar knock of an old reflex. If clarity evaporates as soon as the scene changes, it was a mood. A mood is a match, bright and brief. A signature is a hearth, steady enough to warm the house. There is physiology beneath the poetry. When the heart settles into coherent variability, the brain stops spending its voltage on imaginary fires and routes power to the regions that plan, integrate, and choose with ethics. Exhales grow heavier than the story. Vision widens. The vagus nerve reminds the body that it is safe enough to think well. This is why some people appear effortlessly lucid. Their state is doing half the work before a single thought is formed. You do not need rituals so ornate that only a vacation can fit them. What holds is simple and repeatable, arriving in your body for a handful of breaths, letting posture organize without stiffness, speaking one clean line that names your baseline for the day, calm, clarity, truth, sufficiency, and allowing your movements to agree with it. Touch the objects you use most as quiet metronomes: a cup, a pen, a door handle, and each contact becomes a miniature return to that line. Before messages with stakes, shave a third of the words, remove apology padding, keep one honest verb. When you leave a room or a scroll hole, breathe once, decide what you keep, decide what you archive, feel your feet, and then move. Treat a noisy day like triage rather than drama. What comes in through screens and faces either strengthens your baseline or picks at it. If it picks, reduce exposure a little and widen your view so you see the whole room instead of the single demand in front of you. What rises inside your mind auditions for a role. Cast the thoughts that steady your breath and simplify the next step, and archive the ones that ask you to betray yourself to belong. What goes out through your mouth or fingers can extend your signature into the world or puncture it. If you feel a leak, shorten the sentence and let silence carry the rest. Old patterns will not slam a door to reclaim you. They will send invitations that sound polite. Answer too fast, over-explain, apologize for being clear. Accept urgency you did not create. Decline without theater. A slower breath before you speak, a plain "not today." A measured exit when a room wants the version of you that no longer exists. These quiet refusals train the field more effectively than loud declarations ever could. As the signal stabilizes, the cast reshuffles without your management. Some people will breathe more easily in your presence. Some will press for the previous script. Resist rescuing and resist persuading. The urge to convince is often fear of standing at a new altitude without company. Let the field curate. When pitch holds, the choir changes, and what leaves is better understood as clearance than as loss. Fewer tabs open on your devices, fewer half-promises in your calendar, fewer sentences needed to make the same point. Space inside you begins to breathe. Recognition arrives at whisper volume instead of shouting, and timing improves. What looked like luck from the outside feels like listening from the inside. Guard against two subtle traps. The first is performance coherence, a calm face draped over a frantic body. The field reflects the tone beneath expression. The jaw and the diaphragm always tell the truth, so repair state first and sentences second. The second é o maximalismo espiritual, que troca 3 alavancas simples por 10 exercícios perfeitos e exaustivos. Repetição constrói frequência. Espetáculo constrói fadiga. When you wobble, and you will, read it as weather rather than failure. On waxing days of glide, invest, decide, build, ship. On waning days of fog, simplify. Less input, smaller tasks done cleanly, more sleep, anchors within reach. The beacon does not need to blind the horizon. It only needs to stay on. Even in the wild, there is a 90-second way back. Make your feet real on the ground. Soften the tongue against the palate. Let your eyes widen until the edges of the room return. Take one exhale longer than the inhale. Name the pull of the room. Hurry, prove, please, and then name your baseline once: clarity, proportion, sufficiency. Speak one sentence that serves that baseline or say nothing and let posture speak. Leave on your timing, not the room's. When signature and readiness travel together, rooms de-escalate without instruction, negotiations settle without strain, and opportunities feel like belonging rather than conquest. From aqui, the work turns from signaling to embodiment. The quiet discipline of living as if the upgrade has already taken root so that the field stops treating your new tone as a visitor and begins to greet it as the host. Transformation does not prove itself in the fireworks of a perfect morning. It proves itself at noon on an ordinary day when the old gravity tugs and you do not move. Integration is the art of making new truth quiet. It is what remains after the glow fades when there is no soundtrack, no spare hour, no admiring audience. Only a body that remembers how to breathe and a mind that agrees to follow. If inspiration is a spark, integration is the ember that keeps a home warm through long weather. It begins with a simple reversal. You stop living toward the reality you want and begin living from it. This is not a performance. It is a change in jurisdiction. The posture of your shoulders, the weight of your breath, the precision of your words become the law your nervous system obeys. You do not repeat a sentence to convince the world. You let your tissues demonstrate it until the sentence is merely a description of what is already happening. The heart is the instrument that makes this sustainable. When its rhythms are chaotic, the mind spends its voltage scanning for threat and the mouth spends its verbs trying to control what the body cannot bear. When its rhythms are coherent, perception widens, timing improves, and decisions stop costing so much blood. Coherence is not a trance. It is a measurable conversation between breath and pulse, where the exhale becomes heavier than the story. and the story loses its power to command. In that state, the most radical thing you can do is also the most ordinary. Remain. Remain in the room while the urge to flee rises and falls. Remain in your body while an old opinion of yourself tries to reapply for the job. Remain in the silence after you speak the cleanest possible line and refuse to fill it with padding. Remaining is not passivity. It is authorship that trusts the page to hold. Integration disappoints the part of you that craves spectacle because it asks for repetition. The field takes its cue from what you consistently embody, not from what you occasionally declare. So the day becomes a loom. You cross it with small threads of behavior that rhyme with the baseline you have chosen. A breath lengthened on purpose when urgency knocks. A word removed when explanation would leak your power. A pause taken before you agree to carry what is not yours. These do not look like magic. They look like adulthood, yet they are the machinery by which possibility settles into form. Often the first proof that you are integrating is subtraction. Invitations drop away. Certain conversations dry up. The algorithm forgets to show you the bait that used to hook you. At first, this feels like loss, but read it correctly. The site is being cleared for construction, and clear sites are not dramatic. You will encounter days when the new baseline feels distant, when the body revives a memory you did not choose, when the mind drags you to the door of an old room and begs to be let back in. Call these waning days. Do not argue with them. Reduce input. Lower your voice. Keep promises to yourself so small that you cannot reasonably fail. Fold one thing. Send one honest sentence. Walk one block without a device and let your eyes touch the far edges of space until your breath follows. Coherence is cyclical like the moon you keep noticing. Waxing days of glide, waning days of fog. The practice is not to force perpetual noon. It is to travel the cycle without abandoning yourself. On glide days, invest in what matters. On fog days, tend the ember. All days, refuse the bargain that trades self-respect for speed. Relationships will test integration faster than any solitary ritual. People who love the performance may not love the coherence. Requests will arrive wrapped in urgency. Compliments will be barbed with demands. The past will knock with private nicknames it uses to enter unchallenged. You do not need new speeches for this. You need a new center of gravity. Answer more slowly than you want to. Stand a half step back from rooms that pull without feeding your baseline. Let silence do 20% more of the work. When you do speak, let the sentence be short enough to fit on stone. Integration is not about winning arguments. It is about ceasing to audition for roles you have outgrown and allowing the cast to reconfigure around your current script. Work, too, will resort itself. Tasks that once provided safety will feel expensive if they tax your state beyond what they pay it back. Effort will still be needed, but it will be proportioned. You will stop spending 8 hours repairing the consequences of 3 anxious minutes. Creativity that used to require long rituals will arrive mid-errand, because the channel is no longer clogged with the noise of proving. Money will begin to behave like breath, moving through rather than being hoarded against an imagined collapse, because trust stops atrophy and returns discretion. None of this makes you invulnerable. It makes you readable to yourself. Readable people negotiate better, leave earlier, and rarely need to announce it. If you need proof that integration is underway, look for ease where there used to be friction. You will notice that you recover in minutes instead of days, that apologies grow rarer because you are no longer bargaining against your own knowing, that no lands without thunder and yes is not a compensation for shame. Timing improves too. Guidance arrives before the crisis, not after. You catch it at whisper volume and do not require life to shout. And when you do slip, because humans do, you will not translate the slip into a story about failure. You will breathe, archive the detour, and re-enter the line. The old room learns that its key no longer fits. This is the quiet scandal of integration. Nothing appears to change from the outside until suddenly everything has. The friends who once called you intense will call you clear. The rooms that used to raise their volume around you will lower it. The invitations that asked you to be smaller will stop arriving because the address has changed. You will understand, with a relief that feels like a tide going out, that belonging is not a political project. It is the natural consequence of coherence. From here, the work turns from inner alignment to embodied practice in the world you touch each day. The way your voice, your sleep, your nourishment, your movement, and your attention compose a stable broadcast that other lives can harmonize with. The next steps will translate this into the body's language so that what you know becomes what you are, even when no one is watching. Integration leaves fingerprints on matter, not as spectacle, but as subtle adjustments that become unmistakable once you know how to read them. Sleep is usually the first witness. The hours do not always grow longer. They grow more decisive. You fall through layers faster, wake clearer, and sometimes surface in the dark with a mind that does not want noise but wants a pen. Dreams gain weight and texture, carrying scenes that feel less like fantasy and more like rehearsals for conversations you have not had yet, choices you have not made, rooms you have not entered. You recognize people you have never met and wake with sentences that carry the grain of truth, rather than the drift of invention. This is not an escape from life. It is life using the night to brief you without the interference of daylight habits. Treat it with the seriousness of weather. Keep something to write with close by, not to decode symbols with superstition, but to let your waking self catch the tone your sleeping self already trusts. The body follows. Appetite shifts from compulsion to conversation. Foods once chosen for sedation begin to feel heavy, while cleaner, simpler nourishment reads as permission to think well. You will notice this not in a rulebook voice, but in how your system recovers after you eat. The steadiness of your attention, the calm of your pulse, the absence of the crash that used to demand another distraction. Hydration stops being a chore and becomes a quiet ritual. A glass of water held for an extra breath reads to your tissues as care, and cared for tissue performs differently. Sensitivity rises not as fragility but as fidelity. You register fluorescent hum, stale air, chaotic rooms, timelines packed too tight. The same sensitivity that once overwhelmed now begins to serve you when you honor it. You choose a seat with your back to a wall and your eyes to space and notice that meetings cost less voltage. You step outside between tasks and let your gaze touch a distant point, so your nervous system can reset its scale. You turn down the volume on inputs that used to flood you and discover that productivity is not speed. It is precision unburdened by static. There is often a quiet reorganization of time. Hours that once dissolved into scroll fog now carry more work with less strain. Not because you became austere, but because your attention stopped hemorrhaging into proving. Flow returns like a remembered trail. You look up and discover that you completed in 90 minutes what used to take a day of anxious starts. This does not mean you sprint. It means the gears mesh. The mind stops insisting on linear control and learns to trust sequences that unfold from a centered state. You will notice that solutions arrive earlier, sometimes before the problem announces itself, and they arrive clean, unadorned, like a sentence that fits on stone. When you ignore them, friction appears. When you honor them, the day straightens. Your senses widen. Color grows temperature again. Sound carries contour. Texture returns to things your hands had stopped really touching. You start hearing what is not said in a conversation as clearly as what is said. Pauses become informative. Micro-expressions become data. And the body language of rooms becomes legible without effort. This is not mind reading. It is listening without panic. With listening comes discretion. You will find yourself speaking later in a meeting and saying less and still moving the conversation closer to what is true. You will find yourself declining invitations with a calm that does not require a thesis, and accepting others with a yes that needs no defense. Courage feels different in this phase. It is not a surge. It is the absence of tremor when you choose what you already knew. Synchronicity accelerates not as fireworks but as alignment. Books open to the page you needed. Strangers say a sentence you wrote in your journal yesterday. A message arrives the hour you decide without telling anyone. The mind calls it coincidence. The body calls it relief. Treat these not as entertainment but as instruction. When the world answers your inner state, answer back with action, even if small. Send the note, book the room, buy the train ticket, clear the afternoon. The point is not to dramatize guidance, but to honor it before it must repeat itself at higher volumes. Relationships begin to breathe in a new rhythm. Some grow quieter and deeper because the performance layer has burned off. You will sit together without filling the air and feel more seen than after an hour of chatter. Others thin and drift because the bond was built on shared limits rather than shared truth. There is grief here, clean and private, but also the dignity of not arguing with gravity. The people who arrive now feel improbably timely. Collaboration comes without recruitment speeches because values match at the root. You will notice how little convincing is needed when frequencies already agree. Money follows the same physics. It starts moving like air through a room that has had its windows opened. You stop hoarding against a fantasy of collapse and start allocating with proportion, which paradoxically stabilizes your sense of enough. Opportunities that fit your signature feel obvious. Those that would pay well but cost your estate begin to look expensive in a way numbers cannot hide. You do not become reckless. You become accurate. Accuracy breeds trust, and trust changes the kinds of offers that find you. If there is a single hallmark of this phase, it is recovery time. Triggers still arrive, but they do not own the week. You wobble and then re-enter center with a breath, a posture, a sentence that has become a living thing rather than a slogan. You notice that apologies grow rarer not because you refuse accountability, but because you have stopped making bargains against your own knowing. Sleep steadies again after a rough day, not after a rough month. The body stops asking for proof every hour and begins to act as if your chosen baseline is home. Do not mistake any of this for invulnerability. Weather remains weather, but there is a new hospitality in how you host it. Fog is met with simplification, not self-accusation. Storm is met with slowness, not theatrics. Sun is used well rather than squandered on showing that you have sun. And beneath the cycles, a quieter constant holds. The feeling that your life is being written from the inside out. That you have ceased outsourcing authorship to noise. From here, the work turns to how timelines actually shift in response to sustained coherence, why resistance spikes just before the threshold gives way, and how service to the collective emerges naturally when your personal signal is finally stable enough to be useful. There comes a point when the life you have been living begins to loosen like a garment one size too small. It does not tear with drama. It simply stops fitting. Familiar routes feel oddly narrow. Conversations that once animated you flatten into habit. And rooms that used to tolerate your presence now ask for a version of you that no longer exists. This is not failure. It is migration. When coherence stabilizes, you do not merely improve the old storyline. You step to a neighboring track where different outcomes are native. The strangeness you feel is the echo of a map updating in real time. The mind calls it uncertainty. The body recognizes it as fresh oxygen. Resistance often peaks here, not because you are wrong, but because the threshold is near. The past does not vanish. It negotiates. It offers you discounts. One more apology for being clear. One more sprint to earn belonging. One more week of the old tempo while you prepare. You do not need to fight it to cross over. You need to stop paying. Pay with attention and the old world will bill you forever. Withdraw payment and it loses payroll. The nervous system will try to frame this withdrawal as cruelty or arrogance. It is neither. It is proportion. You are learning to distinguish between duty that keeps a system alive and care that keeps a soul alive. Those who only thriving when you are small will call your proportion betrayal. Those who are built for your altitude will call it relief. Relationships reorganize under this gravity without public trial. Some bonds deepen in silence because performance is no longer required to stay in the room. You will look at a friend across a table and feel the floor of the connection drop to bedrock. Fewer words, more truth. Ordinary presence carrying the weight that speech is used to carry badly. Other ties thin and drift without scandal because the shared premise has dissolved. There is grief in this, but it is clean grief. Like returning keys to a house you outgrew and blessing the life it gave you. The temptation to persuade or to win witnesses will arise. Let it pass. Persuasion is often a tax paid to insecurity. The new line you are walking proves itself in the texture of your days, not in the votes you gather. Work begins to answer to different laws as well. Tasks that once felt productive reveal themselves as elaborate detours around fear. You will feel the cost of them in your chest before you can articulate it. What remains and what arrives share a signature, usefulness without self-erasure. You are no longer interested in projects that make you impressive while making you invisible to yourself. Decisions that looked reckless from a scarcity vantage point read as obvious from coherence. You will not be able to explain this shift to everyone, and you will not need to. Explaining drains voltage that the new build requires. Accuracy is your currency now, and accuracy spends quietly. There is a kind of ending that does not slam or echo. It clicks, the way a well-made door settles into its frame. That is what this moment is meant to feel like. Not triumph, not spectacle, but proportion. You arrived before October 1st and learned to treat time not as a hallway to rush down, but as a doorway to pass through with your shoulders set and your breath steady. Along the way, you discovered that reality is not persuaded by slogans. It is arranged by the tone beneath your words. You learned to separate appearance from instruction, to place your attention like a craftsman places a tool, To let thought and feeling agree until they form a single clear signal the world can actually use. You prove this not in a perfect morning but in ordinary friction, when the old gravity tugged and you did not move. If there was a secret, it was smaller and kinder than the mind expected. Coherence over theatrics, authorship over argument, repetition over performance. The heart took its rightful place as metronome, slowing the mind's panic, widening perception, returning voltage to the circuits that choose with ethics. Sleep began to brief you. Appetite turned into conversation. Rooms became legible without your having to strain. Subtraction revealed itself as clearance, not loss. Relationships resorted without public trials. Work answered to laws that did not require you to disappear to be useful. And money started moving like air in a room with open windows. You noticed how little convincing is needed when frequency already agrees, and how little explanation is required when a boundary fits on one clean line. You also learned the patience to cross without fanfare. The past did not vanish. It negotiated. It offered discounts you no longer took. You recognized invitations that were really tests. Answer too fast, over-explain, apologize for being clear, and you declined without theater, letting silence carry more of the weight. You gave up the habit of persuading and chose the habit of listening. Guidance stopped shouting through crisis and started whispering in alignment, and you honored it before it had to repeat itself at higher volume. The result was not invulnerability, it was readability. You became legible to yourself, and legible people make fewer bargains against their own knowing. They leave earlier, enter cleaner, and spend less of their life repairing the damage of moments when they abandoned their center. Crossing the date did not grant you immunity from weather. It gave you rhythm. Waxing days invited investment. Waning days asked for simplification. All days asked for fidelity to the baseline you chose. That fidelity changed the way rooms responded to you. Conversations landed sooner, decisions cost less blood, and opportunity began to feel like belonging rather than conquest. Service emerged not as sacrifice but as overflow. One sentence that cleared fog, one silence that allowed another's clarity to arrive, one presence that shortened confusion without leaving a dent in your bones. This is the kind of influence that endures because it requires no audience to exist. So we close not with a drum roll, but with a seal. Your life is being written from the inside out now. The quill is steady. The page is yours. The gate behind you does not lock. It simply recedes because you no longer need the urgency of a window to choose who you are. What remains is a cadence you can keep in any weather. Breath heavier than the story, posture organized without stiffness, words precise enough to fit on stone. If you forget, you will remember faster. If you wobble, you will return sooner. If you are asked to trade self-respect for speed, you will recognize the price and keep your currency. From here, the work is beautifully unglamorous. Keep the house you have built inside yourself swept and aired. Curate what you consume so your signal stays clean enough to be useful. Let subtraction continue to make room for what belongs. Let addition be quiet and accurate when it happens. And when the past sends a postcard, read it with tenderness and return to your day. The measure is simple. Does this choice strengthen the baseline or pick at it? Ask softly, answer honestly, act accordingly. The world will call this luck. You will know it as listening. And the longer you keep listening, the more natural it will feel to live from certainty rather than toward it. Until one afternoon, you notice that effort and ease have traded places, and remaining in the new line costs less than returning to the old. That is how you will know the crossing has held. That is how others will know it too, without your needing to say a word. Walk forward as if your presence organizes rooms, because often it will. Speak only as much as truth requires, because it rarely needs adornment. Rest without apology, work without self-erasure, love without bargaining against your own center.